Adapting a book into a movie or TV show involves some big decisions. Sometimes the results aren't what readers or the writer pictured at all. From heroes to villains to actual monsters, here's what these famous book characters were really supposed to look like.
The producers of Game of Thrones changed Asha Greyjoy's name to Yara on the show, maybe to avoid confusion with Osha the wildling. But her name isn't all that's been changed. The novel says she's got black hair cut short and that her nose was too big and too sharp for her thin face, but her smile made up for it. Yara doesn't do much smiling on the show, of course. But then with a brother like Theon, you wouldn't smile either. Speaking of, after he was tortured as the prisoner of Ramsay Bolton, Theon Greyjoy emerged from his ordeal mostly unscathed. Well, except for his dangly bits. But in the books, Theon was apparently treated much more harshly, with him getting a gaunt, skeletal appearance as a result. The trauma of his captivity also turned his hair white, making him look practically like an old man. Of course, Theon was probably not so concerned about his hair by the time he escaped Ramsay. On the show, Ramsay is a really ugly person, but mostly because of his heinous acts, like the aforementioned torture of Theon Greyjoy, or when he kills his own daddy. But in the books, Martin wrote him as a real uggo. He wrote, "He remained an ugly man, big-boned and slope-shouldered, with a fleshiness to him that suggested that in later life he would run to fat. His skin was pink and blotchy, his nose broad, his mouth small, his hair long and dark and dry. His lips were wide and meaty, but the thing men noticed first about him were his eyes. Small, close-set, queerly pale. His eyes were all but colorless, like 2 chips of dirty ice. Old dirty ice eyes, that's what we'll call him." And does anyone else think that shaggy haircut kind of makes him look like Glenn Danzig? Part of Brienne's tragedy is how much she wants to fall in love and be loved, but she knows she's painfully awkward and ugly by Westerosi standards. Of course, because this is television, the showrunners cast the beautiful and statuesque Gwendolyn Christie for the part, so she'll never actually be the homely butt kicker described in the books. Meanwhile, throughout the course of the novels, Brienne has run-ins with enemies that leave her even more damaged, like when she got her teeth knocked out. Martin wrote that Brienne's hair was a squirrel's nest of dirty straw and that her eyes were very large and very blue. Meanwhile, her features were broad and coarse, her teeth prominent and crooked, her mouth too wide, her lips so plump they seemed swollen. 1,000 freckles speckled her cheeks and brow, and her nose had been broken more than once. HBO's makeup artists did a great job covering the massive scars and twisted flesh that cover one side of Sandor Clegane's face. It's pretty much perfect, except for one little thing. They got the wrong side of his face. The book says that the left side of his face was a ruin. His ear had been burned away, there was nothing but a hole. Down by his jaw, you could see a hint of bone where the flesh had been seared away. Aside from the ear and the bony jaw situation, the Hound looks pretty incredible. But it makes you wonder what made them flip sides like that. Maybe actor Rory McCann just doesn't like that side of his face?
Yarm.
It's not too hard to figure out why the show's producers mixed things up for their take on Daario Naharis. That's because Daario should have looked less like a badass warrior and more like a reject from The Hunger Games. The novels describe Daario as flamboyant with a beard that was cut into 3 prongs and dyed blue, the same color as his eyes and the curly hair that fell to his collar. His pointed mustachios were painted gold. Peter Dinklage is just about perfect as Tyrion Lannister, better known as the Imp. But there's just one problem, and at this point you can probably guess what it is. That's right, he's just not ugly enough. Noticing a trend here? The books describe him as having a squashed-in face. Then, after the events of the Battle of the Blackwater, he lost about half of his nose. And finally, he has different colored eyes. So, yeah. Don't look so surprised, but Ser Jorah in the books is not quite as handsome as the showrunners would have us believe. Our favorite friend zone knight is more attractive and also more lightly built on the Game of Thrones television series than his book version counterpart. Once again, Martin plainly states that this character isn't going to win any beauty contests. Ser Jorah was not a handsome man. He had a neck and shoulders like a bull, and coarse black hair covered his arms and chest so thickly that there was none left for his head. Yeesh. Kinda looks like a medieval version of, like, Clint Howard. Or Bob Balaban. Or even Wallace Shawn. He'd make a good Jorah, right?
Inconceivable.
Yeah, you're probably right. Never mind.
Jennifer Lawrence's version of Katniss Everdeen sported an ornate braid to manage her long, brown hair, and she had humble clothing indicative of her life in one of Panem's less favored districts. She also had greenish-blue eyes and didn't exactly look like she'd been on the brink of starvation. And while her ability to wield a bow and fight for her dinner was accurate, there were still some differences to be found with her appearance. In the books, the girl on fire was described as having grey eyes and being much shorter and more gaunt than her screen counterpart. But since J-Law's notorious love of french fries is such a big part of why she's so awesome, no one seemed to care that she wasn't skin and bones for the role, even if the movie was called The Hunger Games. The game makers, filmmakers, got a lot of things right when it came to bringing the boy with the bread to cinematic life with actor Josh Hutcherson, but they also missed the mark on a few important points as well. In the movies, Peter has the same dishwater blonde hair, with a medium height and a stocky build earned the hard way by hauling flour around his parents' bakery. He also had hazel peepers and walked around without any serious injury. Well, until the end of Catching Fire anyway. In the books, though, Peter lost his leg in the first games and had blue eyes, with wavier hair. These are just minor differences, but for the Team Peter faithful, they were still significant. If there's one character who was well matched with his actor counterpart's looks, it was Liam Hemsworth as District 12's handiest hunk, Gale Hawthorne. In the films, he's a tall, alluringly handsome and strong gentleman with the same dark hair and grey eyes that marked so many of the coal miners' children. And he could totally pass for Katniss's cousin, but there was still a few leaps from the source material in his depiction. The book version of the character was much more olive-toned, young, and lean from so many missed meals. The filmmaker stuck with Lenny Kravitz's natural chocolate brown eyes for his turn as Cinna, and opted to add in some facial hair and earrings to round out his looks. Plus, he rocked some low-key fashions and steered clear of the capital makeup selections, save for some gold eyeliner. In the books, though, Katniss's fabulous stylist was described as having green eyes with flecks of gold scattered throughout. Even without the right eye color and a couple of extra earrings, Kravitz embodied all the swagger and self-possession that Cinna called for, and then some, so he was a fan favorite despite the differences. This Capitol escort's flair for extreme fashion and hair appliances certainly came through in the Hunger Games movies. However, there were still some minor deviations from the well-described costumery and wigs Elizabeth Banks sported throughout the written series. In the Hunger Games, her pink wig was considered ridiculous and slid out of place. And in Catching Fire, she was said to have donned a pumpkin-colored headdress rather than a canary situation she wore on her head. Even though she had a few outfit and hairstyle changes, however, that was definitely Effie we saw up there on the big screen.
Happy Hunger Games, and may the odds be ever in your favor.
In the films, Haymitch was a morose, disheveled alcoholic who disgusted Katniss with his lack of composure. He also had straight blonde locks and blue eyes, and never stumbled and fumbled his way through life in Victor Village. In the books, however, Haymitch was said to have dark, curly hair with the same grey eyes as his fellow Coal District alums. It was pretty easy to forget that the hair and eye colors were off, as the mentor who decided to shape up his act enough to help his girl stay alive in the arena. But for the nitpickers out there, the casting choice was still a confusing one. Willow Shield's turn as the little sister who accidentally started a revolution was convincing enough. She was slight and sweet and believable as the girl you'd go to bat for. However, in the books, she was said to have crystal blue eyes and weighed no more than 70 pounds soaking wet, which was not the case on screen. Donald Sutherland's screen turn as President Snow was one of the biggest changes from the written origins because, while he was menacing enough with his refined sense of evil, he didn't match the book's description of the small, thin, sinister-looking villain of the books, with a botched enchantment job on his lips and Snake's eyes to match the unsettling appearance. Hey, at least they got the white rose on his lapel right, of course. That'd be a hard one to screw up. Whether or not Sam Claflin's version of Finnick Oda matched that extraordinarily good-looking muscle man he was described to be is a matter of subjective perspective, but the filmmaker certainly gave his frame some consideration when casting the role. Not only is he athletic, tan, and cocky, but he's also adequately redeemed by his penchant for both shirtlessness and sugar cubes on screen. Plus, he clung to his trusty trident as tightly as he was supposed to. The most noticeable difference from the books? The fact that his sea green eyes weren't as striking on screen, and his hair was more sandy blonde than bronze, as written. Personality-wise, Jenna Malone's screen edition of Joanna Mason was a dead ringer for the sassy, sharp-tongued girl we grew to know and love in the books.
Yes, I'm angry. You know, I'm getting totally screwed over here. The deal was that if I win the Hunger Games, I get to live the rest of my life in peace.
But as accurate as they got her character, her appearance in the films was a little different. On screen, she was lean and traditionally pretty with long brown locks. Well, until they were shaved off by the Capitol. In the books, meanwhile, her eyes were said to be wide, while her hair was worn with a signature spike. She was also perceived by readers as being more muscular, seeing as she was from the lumberjack district and all. Julianne Moore's screen version of President Coin was pretty faithful to the books, in that she was a middle-aged woman with wig-like grey hair and a colourless pallor. However, she looked like she was in her late 30s and just wore a grey wig to age herself, while the book version pegged her for around 50 and with her silvery eye colour being a lot more distinct. In the Hunger Games movie, Jacqueline Emerson's vision of Foxface had bright red hair and an aptitude for stealth and a low-key survivalism. But she's hardly meek, and she certainly couldn't be confused for an animal. In the book, however, she was described as having a face which had, well, fox-like features, hence Katniss's name for her. Anyone can open a bottle of red hair dye and say they're Foxface, but to look the part is something else entirely. If Thresh had appeared as imposing as he was written, there's no way audiences would believe he'd been killed in one-on-one combat with Kato, even if the latter was a career tribute.
I'm prepared, vicious, I'm ready to go.
As portrayed by Dio Okuni in the movie, he was strong and tough, but he was also rather approachable in size and demeanor, which made his decision to forego killing Katniss when he had the opportunity that much more believable. Meanwhile, in the book, he's described as having golden eyes, standing well over 6 feet tall, and sporting the build of an ox from so many days in the agriculture sector. Rue. A vocal contingent of Hunger Games readers were up in arms about the fact that Rue, as played by Amanda Sternberg, was portrayed as having brown skin in the first film. Of course, those fans clearly misunderstood the source material. While Rue was said to resemble Katniss's sister Prim in size and innocence, she was specifically described as being black in the book. The film's representation of the tiny, feisty, and quick-on-her-feet preteen was accurate to the writing and gave her that same smile that affected Katniss so in both versions. She wasn't quite as frail as she was on paper, but that's about the only major difference to be found. Otherwise, she was perfect. Archie is one of the most famous redheads in pop culture, so of course actor KJ Apa would have to dye his naturally brown hair red for the part. However, despite the fact that Apa spent 10 hours in a salon struggling to get the right shade of orange, it's nowhere near as light as Archie's hair from the comics. Apa is also missing the character's signature freckles. They did the eyebrows pretty much perfect though. Of course, the show also had to CW-ify Archie a little.
Oh my god.
What?
Game changer. Archie got hot. He's got abs now.
The comic version of Archie wasn't exactly running around Riverdale showing off his six-pack, and while he rocks some pretty great cheekbones in the newer comics, classic Archie was much more of a babyface. Still, the show's fans don't seem to be complaining. Cole Sprouse made a huge transformation from Sweet Life child star to the angsty version of Jughead Jones shown on Riverdale. The actor had to dye his naturally blonde hair dark brown for the part, although he keeps it slightly longer than Jughead does in the comics. Still, Sprouse did a great job of adapting Jughead's signature squint and beanie. The only real thing keeping him from being a dead ringer from the character is the nose. In the original Archie comics, Jughead has a Pinocchio-style nose, which Sprouse, thankfully, lacks. Archie's dad, Fred, in the comics is overweight and nearly bald, but the CW decided to give Papa Andrews a little bit of an upgrade, casting former Beverly Hills 90210 heartthrob Luke Perry in the part. Perry's Fred is pretty buff, with a bit of a beard and a messy hairstyle to match. He's also definitely not sporting the tiny mustache Fred has in the comics, which is fine. While we don't mind Perry's facial hair at all, a bald Perry with a beer belly isn't really what anybody wants. We feel old enough as it is just seeing him be a dad. Cheryl Blossom gets a much bigger role in Riverdale than in the Archie comics, where she mostly just serves as a supporting character and further romantic rival for Archie. On the show, Cheryl and her brother Jason are at the center of the show's murder mystery, and what Cheryl knows could end up being the key to solving the crime. Like her comic book counterpart, Madeline Petch is a redhead, although her hair is a bit darker than the original's bright locks. Petch also has brown eyes, while Cheryl is usually shown with green eyes in the comics. But we're not criticizing. After all, we've all seen what happens when you end up on Cheryl's bad side. Kevin is fairly new to the comics, introduced in 2010 as the series' first openly gay character. In the comics, Kevin is blonde, as opposed to actor Casey Cott, who has dark brown hair. Cott also has green eyes, while in the comic, they're blue. So he pretty much looks nothing like the comic version of Kevin. He just better keep making those snarky comments directly to the audience.
Should we maybe re-binge Making a Murderer on Netflix tonight?
Riverdale's resident brilliant blonde is played on the show by Lily Reinhart, who's shown she already has the character's sweet persona down pat. However, while the actress does sport Betty's signature blonde ponytail, her hair is a little darker than the comic's yellow. She also doesn't have the bangs that Betty is usually depicted with. Other than that though, Reinhart is pretty much a dead ringer for her classic character. Actress Camila Mendes said she wasn't planning on auditioning for the part of Veronica until she found out producers were making the character Latina, a departure from a Caucasian background in the comics. Mendes, who is Brazilian, said she liked that the character wasn't a stereotype of Latinas, which ended up attracting her to the role. Aside from Riverdale's change in Veronica's background, Mendes is pretty much identical to her comic book counterpart, with the same striking beauty and dark hair. Archie's comic book rival Reggie is played by former Disney Channel actor Ross Butler on Riverdale, changing the character's Caucasian background to Eurasian. However, Butler definitely has the slicked back dark hair, cocky attitude, and good looks to bring Riverdale's resident bad boy Reggie to life. Now if only he'd get more screen time. Riverdale made the decision to make the entirety of the Josie and the Pussycats lineup African-American, unlike the comics which featured two white characters. Ashley Murray leads the band as Josie McCoy, embodying the character's signature sass, spunk, and musical talent pretty much perfectly. In the comics and cartoons, Josie is yet another redhead, only she also likes to wear cat ears and a cat suit while rocking out, naturally. Riverdale moved away from the character's outlandish style into more toned-down, fashion-forward outfits, which reflects the character's transition from sweet girl to ambitious rocker, which, you know, rocks. Boom.
Most fans know that DCEU's Superman, Henry Cavill, plays the titular role of the Witcher. However, not everyone knows that Cavill is also a Witcher superfan. It was his passion for the franchise that finally convinced showrunner Lauren Schmid-Hissrich to cast Cavill as Geralt of Rivia. Though some fans may have been made skeptical by the news at first, once Cavill first appeared on the screen, there was no question in anyone's mind that he was perfect for the role. It certainly helped that Geralt's look took a lot of inspiration from CD Projekt Red's popular video game series. Donning a long white wig and yellow contact lenses, Cavill's look is quite similar to Geralt from the game franchise. There are a few clear differences, however. For instance, Geralt in the games has a distinct scar over his left eye. The video game Geralt also appears to be at least a decade older than Cavill. Of course, Witchers age slower than normal humans, so we can forgive the actor for his younger looks. Whether fans prefer Cavill's Geralt or CD Projekt Red's is a matter of debate, but it is clear that The Witcher show took at least some of Cavill's look from the game franchise. Princess Cirilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon, or Ciri for short, is an integral character in The Witcher. She is not only Geralt's ward, but she is also a child of the Elder Blood, which gives her unbelievable powers. As fans witnessed in Season 2 of The Witcher, Ciri is only just beginning to discover her full potential, and she has a long way to go before getting her magical abilities under control. Ciri is played by Freya Allan in the Netflix series, and her look tries to closely copy the character's description in the Witcher novels. In the books, Ciri's hair is described as ashen-colored, and she has noticeably green eyes. As the Witcher game franchise takes place after the events of the books, Ciri's character doesn't make an appearance in the video games until The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. At this point in the timeline, Ciri is about 18 years old, several years older than Alan's portrayal of Ciri in the show. The character in The Witcher 3 maintains Ciri's white blonde hair and distinct green eyes, though she also has a long scar on her cheek and wears heavy eye makeup. Fans of the books will know that the scar has a story behind it, one that fans of the show will have to wait on. Few are more formidable in the Witcher world than Yennefer of Vengerberg, a young woman who comes from nothing. Her determination and strength make her one of the most powerful and dangerous mages on the continent. Yennefer is played by Anya Chalotra on the show, and like Yennefer of the books, Chalotra has long black hair. She wears contact lenses to match the sorceress's violet eyes, a trait that marks her elven heritage. We often see Yen wearing black and white clothing, the character's preferred color scheme in the novels. In the Witcher video games, Yennefer is first introduced in The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. In that game's story, Geralt hasn't seen Yennefer in several years, since he regains his memory after a long bout of amnesia. The game version of Yennefer is a closer match to the character in the books. Her hair is still black, but it falls over her shoulders in a mass of dark curls. She also has violet-colored eyes and wears her trademark black and white attire. The video game Yennefer appears to be some years older than Chalotra, yet like Geralt, age doesn't mean much when you are practically immortal. Whatever fans think Yennefer should look like, no one can argue that Yennefer of Vengerberg is a force to be reckoned with in any medium.
Guys, your harmonies were a little pitchy. Gordon, you're amazing. Talent recognizes talent. Let's go again.
An undeniable fan favorite, Jaskier is Geralt's loyal friend and sidekick on the Netflix TV series. Not only does he provide comic relief, but he gives audiences a catchy earworm with Toss a Coin to Your Witcher in Season 1.
Toss a coin to your witcher, oh valley of plenty, whoa.
Following that hit tune was his emotional ballad Burn Butcher Burn in Season 2, which recalls epic breakup songs like Alanis Morissette's You Oughta Know. Played by Joey Beatty, Jaskier's appearance changes slightly between Seasons 1 and 2 of The Witcher. In Season 1, Beatty keeps his dark brown hair cut short and his clothes vary in color and style. When we see Jaskier in Season 2, he now sports a long coat and his hair is a bit longer. He also wears a stylish leather cap when he performs in Season 2 episode Redanian Intelligence. Jaskier is called Dandelion in the English language versions of The Witcher books and video games. Dandelion appears in all 3 games, and his looks often change. However, most gamers are familiar with Dandelion's look in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, where he wears a colorful jerkin with a matching pink hat and feather. He also has dark brown hair as well as a mustache and goatee. Sorceress Triss Merigold is a friend to both Yennefer and Geralt in The Witcher. Like Yennefer, Triss was taught how to use magic at the Tower of Aretuza, and she later became an advisor to King Foltest of Temeria. In Season 1 of The Witcher, Triss has shoulder-length curly brown hair. This is more accurate to the character of Triss in the novels, who is described as having chestnut-colored hair. However, Triss in the video games is a very striking redhead. This might be the reason why when we see Triss again in The Witcher Season 2, her hair has been tinted red. Triss Merigold plays a big part in the Witcher video game series and is a primary romance option for Geralt.
No more about the battle. Just hold me and say something nice.
While Geralt makes it clear that he only sees Triss as a friend in Season 2 of The Witcher show, he and Triss are very intimate in The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings video game. Triss is also featured in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and Geralt is forced to choose between her and his long-lost love Yennefer. Though Triss may be competition for Geralt's affections in the games, in the Netflix series, Geralt only has eyes for Yen. In Season 2 of The Witcher, Geralt travels with Ciri to Kaer Morhen, the home of the Witchers. It was here that the show introduces fans to Vesemir, the patriarch of the group.
Wolf, you're home. Finally.
Vesemir leads the last of the remaining Witchers and is a father figure to Geralt. He is charged with protecting what remains of Kaer Morhen and looking after the younger Witchers. Sadly, their numbers are dwindling and they currently have no way to bring more into the fold, which is a big concern for Vesemir. Vesemir in the show is played by Kim Bodnia, and it's uncanny just how much he looks like Vesemir in the original The Witcher game. Both have long white hair and a walrus mustache, although Vesemir of the game has a much more stern expression. The video game version of Vesemir also has small, piercing eyes that often look disapproving, while Bodnia's Vesemir has eyes that are much more open and kind. The two characters also appear to be about the same age. The treatment of the character Eskel has been a source of controversy for the Witcher fans. Eskel is one of Geralt's Witcher brothers at Kaer Morhen, and they trained together as boys. As played by actor Basil Eidenbenz on the Netflix show, Eskel has long curly hair, a slim figure, and a scar on the right side of his face. Although Eskel in the Witcher games also has distinctive facial scarring, this is perhaps the only trait he shares with his TV show counterpart. In The Witcher and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Eskel has short, dark hair and a stocky, muscular build. His scars are also more prominent in the game version as they cover his eye, cheek, mouth, and chin. The differences between Eskel in the show and Eskel in the video games goes far beyond their physical appearances. In the Season 2 episode Kaer Morhen, Eskel's character is attacked by a Leshy. He undergoes a transformation that turns him into a monster, and Geralt is forced to kill him. The death of the character caused an uproar with fans, but perhaps the biggest objection to the Netflix version of Eskel was the changes to his personality. In the games and books, Eskel is quiet, kind, and loyal, a far cry from the partying, aggressive, and hostile Witcher we meet in the show.
Lambert, what a jolly nice chap.
Like Eskel, Lambert was raised by Vesemir alongside Geralt at Kaer Morhen. In the second episode of The Witcher Season 2, he is introduced as a fun-loving storyteller and a fierce protector. He later encourages Ciri to push her limits while training by introducing her to a challenging obstacle course. Although he comes off as a bit harsh with Ciri at first, it's clear he has her best interests at heart. Paul Bullion plays Lambert in the Netflix series, and his appearance is quite different from the character in the Witcher games. In the show, Lambert has long, curly red hair and a full beard. Lambert in the game franchise has short, dark brown hair, a trim beard, and a scar that runs from his hairline down his cheek. Lambert's personality in the games is also quite different from how he is portrayed in the TV show. Lambert's character in the games is much grimmer and has a sarcastic streak.
What? What are you doing? Killing monsters. Good one.
Nevertheless, Lambert is a fan favorite amongst gamers, so hopefully Bullion's representation will live up to their standards. In The Witcher Season 2 episode Redanian Intelligence, the series introduces fans to an intriguing new character. Sigismund Dijkstra is the head of Redania's spy network and an advisor to King Vesemir. His job is to keep tabs on the elves and Nilfgaardians, who have allied against the northern kingdoms. He is played by Graham McTavish, who has a bald head, a full gray beard, and a muscular frame. In the video game, Dijkstra is bald, clean-shaven, and has a large build. He also appeared in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. He is one of 4 crime syndicate leaders in the city of Novigrad and helps Geralt in his search for Ciri, though the two are anything but friends.
Sorry, can't let that happen.
McTavish shares some of the same physical traits as the game version of Dijkstra, yet there are clear differences in how he portrays the character. In the Witcher TV show, Dijkstra is underhanded and sly, while the version of the character in the game tends to rely on brute force to get things done. Though she only appears for a moment in the Season 2 finale of The Witcher, the sorceress Philippa Eilhart makes quite an impression in that short time. Using the magical ability to shapeshift, Philippa spends most of her time in the form of an owl, going back and forth to relay messages between Dijkstra and his elven spy contact, Dara. Actor Cassie Clare plays Philippa on the Netflix show. She has long black hair, a striking figure, and wears an elegant gown decorated with feathers along the collar and shoulders. Philippa appears in The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Her appearance is quite different from the character on the TV series. The game version of Philippa has long black hair that is styled into 2 braids, and she wears long feathers in her hair. Fans of The Witcher series may notice that Claire wears 2 small braids at the front of her hair, which is perhaps a tribute to the game version of Philippa. The finale of The Witcher Season 2 ends with a huge plot twist that leaves fans reeling: the true identity of the King of Nilfgaard, Emhyr var Emreis. It turns out Emhyr is none other than Duny, the young man who was helped by Geralt in Season 1. Fans will remember that Duny is placed under a curse that turns him into a porcupine man-beast, and he crashes Queen Calenthi's party to claim the hand of Princess Pavetta. When he is attacked by the Queen's soldiers, Geralt steps in to defend him. The curse is broken when Pavetta uses True Love's kiss to turn Duny back to his human self. Duny is the father of Ciri, yet what happened to him between his curse being broken and becoming the King of Nilfgaard is still a mystery. On the Netflix show, Emhyr is played by Bart Edwards, and his appearance is not all that different from Emhyr in the Witcher games. Both characters have long dark hair, though Edwards' hairstyle is wavy and wild, while Emhyr in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt wears his hair slicked back and straight. The game version of Emhyr is also much older than the character on the show, mainly because the game's events take place many years after the story in the Witcher books. Now that Emhyr's identity has been disclosed, fans can bet that he will have a big part to play in the future of the Witcher Netflix series.
Netflix's The Witcher opens with a swampy duel between Geralt of Rivia and the Kikimora, a hulking spider-like creature with an unsettling human head. While Geralt makes quick work of the beast, the Kikimora ends up getting the last laugh. Despite the Kikimora's ferocity, no one is willing to pay Geralt for its corpse, making all his effort futile. While the Kikimora battle makes for a great opening set piece, The Witcher's version of the creature, both in the series and in the games, is a very liberal take on the Kikimora legend. In Slavic mythology, a Kikimora is a house spirit that sneaks into your home via via your keyhole in order to deliver bad news. Once a kikimora settles in, it can also cause nightmares, sleep paralysis, and nighttime calamities like dying cattle and spoiled food. Don't ever look directly at a kikimora either. Do so and you might die. Instead of a multi-legged monstrosity, a kikimora typically looks like a mix between an old woman and a bird, complete with a beak and chicken legs and a headscarf wrapped around her stringy hair. Unlike Geralt, you typically don't kill them with a sword either. Just leave some food behind on the stove where kikimori live. According to some legends, that'll do the trick. The Striga is Geralt's foe in Episode 3 of the series, Betrayer Moon and The Witcher, Andrzej Sapkowski's very first Witcher story. On Netflix's The Witcher, the Striga looks like a giant humanoid monster, complete with a long dangling umbilical cord. In Polish folklore, the Striga is no less dangerous, but it does work a little differently. Strigai were said to be people born with two souls and who could be identified by their twin hearts or extra pairs of teeth. When a baby was born that people suspected was a Striga, they were banished. Then one of their souls died and they became monsters, often with feathers and blue or gray skin, who transformed into owls to suck the blood of their victims. The Striga is one of the most dangerous creatures in Polish folklore, and it's not easy to get rid of them. Some people claim that cutting off a Striga's head and burying it far away from the body will get the job done, although burying one face down with a sickle around its neck is said to work too. The Witcher's fourth episode, Banquets, Bastards, and Burials, is based on the Brothers Grimm story Hans My Hedgehog. In that story, a child named Hans is born with the legs of a human and the body and head of a hedgehog. Years after his family casts him out, Hans runs across two lost kings in the forest. Hans offers to help them find their way, but for a price. Each ruler needs to give Hans the first thing that greets the king at the royal court upon his arrival home. That ends up being the princess, meaning Hans gets a beautiful wife for his trouble. Hans and Duny, the cursed knight and the Witcher, differ in a few subtle ways. While Duny is as big as a man, Hans is more hedgehog-sized. He rides a rooster like a horse and is often mistaken for an animal. Further, Duny simply transforms into a human. Hans's shift is a lot more gruesome. Not only does he physically shed his hedgehog skin, but after throwing it into the fire, his new human skin is charred black, requiring the aid of a local healer. The Dryads of Brokilon Forest don't mess around. Forced into hiding by humans and monsters, they fearsomely protect their land from intruders. They shoot Ciri's friend Dara before he can even reach the woods. They force all newcomers to drink the water of Brokilon, which kills anyone who harbors ill will against the forest and makes anyone who doesn't slowly forget their past. Accordingly, the Witcher's Dryads dress in armor and heavy makeup. They're imposing figures as they should be, and they resolutely stand their ground. That's a big departure from the Dryads of Greek mythology where the creatures originated. In the original myths, Dryads, or nymphs who were tied to forest or trees, were actually known to be exceptionally shy. They didn't really fight, although some of them could transform from human-like creatures into trees. For the most part, Dryads are passive figures in the Greek myths. It was up to the Witcher to give them some grit.
Don't hurt me.
In Rare Species, Geralt and Jaskier join a group of warriors who are competing to see who can kill a dragon first. Not only is the hunt that ensues full of twists and turns, but it's a big part of The Witcher's behind-the-scenes history. The story that the episode is based on, The Bounds of Reason, is an adaptation of the Polish folktale that inspired Sapkowski to create Geralt in the first place. The story of the Wawel dragon dates back to the 13th century, and while it takes many forms, some elements are always the same. There's always a king whose subjects are terrorized by a man-eating, cattle-devouring dragon. There are always brave knights who try to conquer the dragon in hopes of winning the princess's hand. They always fail. Finally, there's always a hero, usually depicted as a cobbler, who decides to use the dragon's own appetite against him. The cobbler fills a sheepskin with hay and sulfur, then waits for the dragon to eat it. That makes the dragon so thirsty that it drinks water until it literally explodes. It's one of Poland's most beloved stories. There's even a seven-headed statue commemorating the dragon in Krakow. But Sapkowski thought it was ridiculous. You wouldn't call a cobbler to kill a dragon, he figured, you'd call a professional. And so the author invented a fictional monster hunter, and lo and behold, Geralt of Rivia was born.